The planet Xylos hummed with a low, resonant frequency, a constant thrum that vibrated through everything. The obsidian towers that scraped the perpetually twilight sky, the polished metallic walkways, even the chitinous exoskeletons of the Cathar themselves. It was a world ruled by logic, precision, and unwavering adherence to protocol. A single deviation could trigger societal collapse, or at least, that's what the Cathar believed. The Cathar were a species defined by their strict militaristic structure and almost pathological need for order. Imagine, if you will, a race of highly intelligent bipedal crustaceans, each member functioning as a cog in a vast, complex machine. Their lives were regimented from the moment their larval forms hatched to the moment their exoskeletons finally gave way to the Xylosian elements. Every decision was calculated, every action scrutinized, every potential outcome rigorously analyzed. Emotions were considered a dangerous variable, a flaw in the otherwise perfect equation of their society. And then Jen walked in. Not literally walked in, of course. That would imply a level of decorum completely foreign to her nature. More accurately, she appeared, shimmering into existence in the middle of the Grand Plaza, a sprawling expanse of polished metal usually reserved for military parades and mandatory efficiency drills. One moment there was only the rhythmic stomp of 1,000 Cathar soldiers. The next there was Jen, looking supremely unimpressed. She blinked, adjusted the strap of her decidedly non-regulation tank top, and surveyed her surroundings with an expression that could only be described as mildly curious. "Huh," she muttered, loud enough to be picked up by the Cathar's incredibly sensitive auditory receptors. Definitely not Kansas. Her attire alone was enough to send ripples of consternation through the ranks of the observing Cathar. Her tank top was faded, displaying a logo for a band no one recognized, and her denim shorts were ripped in a way that suggested carelessness rather than strategic battle damage. Even her posture was offensive, a casual slouch that screamed disrespect for the rigid hierarchies of Xylosian society. But it was the way she had arrived that truly horrified them. She hadn't used a designated portal, hadn't filed the proper arrival forms, Form 783 Alpha, subsection Gamma 9, revised edition, hadn't even bothered to exist in the proper dimension moments before. She had simply appeared, as if reality itself was merely a suggestion, a guideline to be casually ignored. Commander Grolak, a particularly high-ranking Cathar known for his unwavering adherence to regulations and his impressive collection of decorative barnacles, was the first to react. His mandibles clicked in agitation, a sound that echoed across the plaza. "Identify yourself, intruder," he commanded, his voice a guttural rasp amplified by his vocal modulator. "State your purpose and explain your unauthorized arrival." Jen blinked again, focusing her attention on Grolak. Hi," she said, her tone utterly devoid of the fear or respect Grolak expected. "Name's Jen, and, I think I took a wrong turn, somewhere. There was this void thingy and, well, here I am." "A void thingy?" Grolak exchanged a bewildered glance with his second-in-command, a smaller, equally rigid Cathar named Flobnar. The dimensional voids were theoretical impossibilities, tears in the fabric of space-time that existed only in advanced physics simulations. No sentient being, let alone a human, could simply take a wrong turn into one. "Impossible," Flobnar hissed, his eye stalks twitching. "The voids are unstable, inherently destructive. No organic life form could survive passage through such a phenomenon." Jen shrugged. "Well, I did. So, maybe your simulations are a little off." She grinned, a disarmingly casual expression that sent another wave of unease through the assembled Cathar. "Besides," she added, pulling a crumpled energy bar from her pocket, "I had snacks." The Cathar stared, utterly baffled. This human had not only violated the fundamental laws of physics, but she was also snacking in the middle of the Grand Plaza, a clear violation of Regulation 42 Beta, subsection Omega 12, regarding the consumption of non-regulation sustenance in designated public areas. It was clear to Grolak that this situation required immediate decisive action. This Gen represented a threat to everything the Cathar held sacred: order, logic, and the unwavering belief in the inherent superiority of their own meticulously crafted reality. "Seize her," Grolak commanded, his voice resonating across the plaza. "Bring her before the Grand Tribunal. She will be held accountable for her transgressions against the laws of Xylos." As the Cathar soldiers advanced, their metallic claws clicking on the polished surface, Jen sighed. "Great," she muttered. "Just my luck. I always end up in court." The Grand Tribunal chamber was the embodiment of Cathar authority. A vast, echoing space carved from the living rock of Xylos, it exuded an aura of ancient power and unwavering judgment. Tiered platforms rose towards a central dais, upon which sat the tribunal itself. 3 ancient Cathar, their exoskeletons adorned with intricate carvings that signified centuries of service and unwavering devotion to the laws of Xylos. The air in the chamber thrummed with a low, almost palpable sense of expectation. Hundreds of Cathar officials, scientists, and military officers stood rigidly at attention, their eye stalks fixed upon the central dais. The only sound was the rhythmic clicking of their mandibles, a constant, unsettling chorus that underscored the gravity of the proceedings. Jen, escorted by a squad of heavily armed Cathar soldiers, was led to a small, uncomfortable-looking platform at the center of the chamber. She glanced around, her expression a mixture of boredom and mild curiosity. "So," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "This is it, huh? Looks like something out of a bad sci-fi movie." The tribunal remained impassive, their multifaceted eyes reflecting the cold, artificial light of the chamber. The central figure, designated first arbiter, finally spoke, his voice a deep, resonant drone that seemed to vibrate the very bones. "Human," he intoned, "you stand accused of violating the fundamental laws of physics, of traversing the forbidden voids, and of disrupting the established order of Xylos. How do you plead?" Jen shrugged, leaning against the restraining bar with a casualness that bordered on sacrilege. "Plead? Not guilty? I mean, I didn't mean to break any laws. I just kinda fell in. And besides," she added, with a mischievous glint in her eye, "what's the point of having laws if you can't break them a little?" The first arbiter's mandibles clicked in what could only be interpreted as displeasure. "Ignorance is no excuse," he stated flatly. "The voids are governed by immutable laws, laws that your very existence has defied. Explain yourself, human. How did you survive the impossible?" Jen sighed dramatically. "Okay, look," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not exactly rocket science. I was just, walking along, minding my own business when I saw this weird, sparkly thing. Figured I'd check it out. Next thing I know, whoosh. Here I am chatting with a bunch of fancy crustaceans." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembled Cathar. "Sparkly thing?" Flobnar hissed from the sidelines. "Is that all you have to offer? A sparkly thing explanation for defying the very fabric of reality?" Jen grinned. "Hey, don't blame me. I'm just a simple girl. Maybe your fabric of reality needs a little ironing, huh?" She punctuated her statement with a wink, an action that seemed to short-circuit several nearby Cathar officials. The first arbiter raised a claw, silencing the growing uproar. "Enough," he commanded. "Human, your flippant attitude will not sway our judgment. We have consulted the great algorithms, analyzed your anomalous energy signature, and reviewed countless simulations. The conclusion is undeniable. Your arrival is an impossibility, a paradox that threatens the very foundation of our understanding." "So, what? You're gonna, execute me for being a walking paradox?" Jen asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. "That seems a little harsh, even for you guys." The first arbiter paused, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. "Your fate," he declared, "will be determined by the Council of Science. They will analyze you, dissect your methods, and attempt to understand the nature of your transgression. Only then will we decide whether you are a threat to Xylos or merely an inconvenience." Jen shuddered. "Dissect me? No thanks. I've seen enough alien autopsy movies to know how that ends. Can't I just, fill out some paperwork and go home? Her request was met with stony silence. The Cathar soldiers tightened their grip on her arms, their metallic claws digging into her skin. Take her away, the first arbiter commanded, his voice echoing through the chamber. Let the examination begin. As Jen was dragged away, protesting loudly, she couldn't help but wonder what she had gotten herself into. A sparkly thing, she thought. Maybe I should have just stayed home and watched TV. The examination thankfully didn't involve any actual dissection. Instead, Jen found herself in a sterile laboratory, surrounded by Cathar scientists in white lab coats, all of whom seemed to regard her with a mixture of fascination and disgust. The first few days were a blur of scans, probes, and utterly incomprehensible questions about quantum entanglement and the nature of subjective reality. Jen mostly answered with sarcastic quips and increasingly elaborate stories about her sparkly thing, much to the frustration of her captors. One particularly humorless scientist, his eye stalk twitching with annoyance, demanded, "Explain, in precise mathematical terms, the mechanism by which you traverse the dimensional void." Jen blinked at him. "Okay, so imagine a rubber band, right? And you stretch it really, really far, then you fold it over and poke a hole through it with a toothpick. And then, poof, you're on the other side. Elementary, my dear Cathar." The scientist simply stared, his mandibles clicking in a rapid, agitated rhythm. It wasn't just the science that Jen seemed determined to misunderstand. The Cathar, being a rigidly hierarchical society, were sticklers for protocol. Every interaction, every gesture, every utterance was governed by a complex web of rules and regulations. Jen, of course, ignored them all. During a formal dinner, with several high-ranking Cathar officials, Jen, mistaking a ceremonial bowl of luminescent algae for a dip, proceeded to dunk her protein ration bar into it. The resulting silence was so profound that you could hear the algae. Well, you could probably hear algae doing whatever it is that algae do. A high-ranking Cathar, his exoskeleton gleaming with polished obsidian, finally spoke, his voice dripping, with thinly veiled disapproval. "Human," he stated, "do you not understand the significance of the sacred algae bowl? It represents the collective wisdom of our ancestors, the very foundation of our societal structure." Jen, oblivious, shrugged. "Well, it could use a little salt," she said, taking another bite. "And maybe some, chili flakes? This thing is bland." Several Cathar nearly fainted. The cultural misunderstandings continued, each more bizarre than the last. She accidentally activated a sacred meditation chamber by using it as a napping booth. She complimented the grand strategist on his snazzy carapace, a comment that was interpreted as a grave insult to his military prowess. She even managed to disrupt a highly sensitive negotiation with a neighboring aquatic species by attempting to communicate with them using dolphin noises she'd learned from a nature documentary. The Cathar were at their wits' end. They had faced down galactic empires, conquered countless worlds, and mastered the secrets of the universe. But they were utterly, completely baffled by one sarcastic human. The Cathar, in their infinite wisdom, or so they believed, possessed a weapon. Not just any weapon, mind you, but the weapon of ultimate deterrence. It was housed in a massive chamber, guarded by layers of force fields and enough Cathar soldiers to populate a small moon. To the Cathar, this weapon represented the pinnacle of their scientific achievement, a testament to their strategic genius and a really, really good reason for other species not to mess with them. Jen, however, viewed it with a healthy dose of skepticism, mostly because she was bored. After weeks of being poked, prodded, and subjected to lectures on the intricacies of Cathar philosophy, a giant, shiny object was just too tempting to ignore. So under the watchful eyes of several very nervous Cathar scientists, she began her inspection. The weapon, as it turned out, was enormous. It was a swirling mass of wires, tubes, and glowing crystals, all humming with barely contained energy. The Cathar scientists explained in grave tones that it could bend space-time, shatter planets, and generally make existence unpleasant for anyone on the receiving end. Jen listened patiently, nodding occasionally, until they were finished. So, she said, it's like a really big gun? The lead scientist, his mandibles quivering, corrected her. It is far more than a mere gun, human. It is a device of unimaginable power capable of rewriting the very fabric of reality. Jen circled the weapon, tapping it thoughtfully. Huh, she muttered. Looks kinda rickety, doesn't it? That was when the horror began. Jen, driven by a combination of boredom and an innate need to tinker, started fiddling. She poked a loose wire, tightened a bolt with her bare hands, and generally wreaked havoc on the weapon's delicate systems. The Cathar scientists, aghast, could only watch in silent terror. Human! One of them finally squeaked. What do you think you're doing? You'll destabilize the entire system. Jen, unfazed, just shrugged. Relax, she said. I'm just seeing how this thing works, and I gotta say, your science is kinda flawed. She pointed to a particularly egregious example of bad engineering. Seriously, what is this? Did you guys just glue this thing together? The Cathar scientists were beyond horrified. They had dedicated their entire lives to understanding this weapon, to mastering its power. And here was this human, casually dismantling their masterpiece and insulting their scientific prowess in the process. As Jen continued her tinkering, she began to laugh. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-blown side-splitting laugh that echoed through the chamber. The Cathar scientists exchanged worried glances. Had the human finally cracked under the pressure? Was this some bizarre form of psychological warfare? Oh man, Jen gasped, wiping tears from her eyes. This is amazing. The tension in the chamber was thicker than a Cathar swamp bog. Every eye, every mandible, every shimmering scale was fixed on Jen, the human who dared to defile their sacred weapon of ultimate deterrence. The air crackled with unspoken accusations and the faint scent of ozone, a Cathar sign of extreme anxiety. Then Jen spoke, her voice echoing in the vast chamber. Okay, she said, still chuckling. I think I get it now. She gestured to a series of interconnected tubes and a large, strangely shaped container. This isn't a weapon at all, is it? A collective gasp rippled through the assembled Cathar. The lead scientist, his face turning a shade of green usually reserved for battlefield camouflage, stammered, What are you implying, human? Jen grinned, a wide, disarming, utterly terrifying grin. I'm implying, she said, that this whole thing is just a really, really over-engineered smoothie maker. Silence. Utter, profound silence. It was as if the entire Cathar species had collectively forgotten how to breathe. Then, a single high-pitched voice piped up from the back. A smoothie maker? Jen nodded enthusiastically. Yep, see these tubes? They're for the fruit. And this container? That's where you put the liquid. And this whole energy matrix thingy? It's just a really inefficient blending mechanism. She pointed to a dial with several indecipherable Cathar symbols. I bet this sets the chunkiness level. She paused, considering. Although, I gotta say, you guys really overdid it. I mean, shattering planets to make a smoothie? That's a bit excessive, even for me. The lead scientist, his mandibles twitching uncontrollably, finally found his voice. This is preposterous, he sputtered. This weapon has been the cornerstone of our civilization for millennia. It has ensured peace and stability throughout the quadrant. Jen raised an eyebrow. Peace and stability through blended fruit? Seems a little subtle, don't you think? She walked over to the control panel and began pressing buttons at random. The machine shuddered, whirred, and then, with a loud pop, a stream of brightly colored liquid shot out of a nozzle and splattered against the far wall. The Cathar recoiled in horror. See? Jen said, unfazed. Smoothie. The liquid, upon closer inspection, appeared to be a mixture of various fruits, vegetables, and, inexplicably, small, wriggling aquatic organisms. It was, by all accounts, a truly horrifying concoction. But the truth, as Jen had so casually revealed, was far more horrifying. The Cathar society, built on the foundation of a lie, began to crack. Their entire identity, their military might, Their very reason for existence was based on a poorly designed kitchen appliance. The implications were staggering. The Grand Tribunal, the High Command, the entire Cathar hierarchy was thrown into chaos. The revelation hit the Cathar society like a rogue asteroid. The foundations of their rigid, militaristic culture, built upon the fear of their weapon of ultimate deterrence, crumbled into dust. Some refused to believe it, clinging desperately to the comforting lie of their past. Others, particularly, the younger generations, embraced the absurdity with open arms, or rather open mandibles. Jen, meanwhile, remained utterly unfazed. While the Cathar were experiencing an existential crisis of epic proportions, she saw an opportunity. Or, more accurately, a challenge. "This thing's horribly inefficient," she muttered, eyeing the smoothie maker with a critical eye. "And the flavor profiles are questionable." And so Jen began experimenting. Using her surprisingly deep knowledge of human culinary arts, honed from years of late-night cooking shows, she started tinkering with the machine's settings, swapping out ingredients and generally improving the overall smoothie-making experience. She replaced the wriggling aquatic organisms with something resembling spinach, much to the initial disgust and eventual delight of the braver Cathar.